Well, welcome everybody to a free soul-centered series webinar. These webinars are done to really help people to have the opportunity to hear and learn more about the understanding of the principles that was originally taught by Sydney Banks. And today we're very fortunate to have Erika Bugbee, who's been working from this understanding for 20 years and is currently really focusing her work with teens, young adults, and families. And I can speak as a client of Erika's and just share how incredibly supportive she's been for Angus and I in our journey with our teenage girls. And even with a foundation in this understanding, it has been very helpful to have a guide along the way, because it's easy to lose perspective when it's your own kids. So I'm just really grateful to you, Erika, and really look forward to hearing what you have to share today. And this will be an interactive webinar. So Erika will share, but there'll be opportunities to ask your specific questions. And what I ask for you to do, if you have a question or comment, if you go to the participants button and press that, then you'll see a raise hand button, and click that, and then I'll be able to know that you have a question. And because I can't see everybody on the screen at the same time, that's going to be the best way for me to know. So if you want to raise your hand, click the participants button and then click the raise hand button, and then I'll know that you have something to share. So we'll turn it over to you, Erika.
Great. Thank you. Thanks for having me, Rohini.
Oh, you're welcome.
This is my favorite topic, which is why I specialize in teenagers and young adults. I never get sick of talking about it, and partly because of what you said is that even if you do this work, or you consider yourself to be pretty good with people or with teenagers, it's just as challenging. So it's in a way it's harder if you feel like you know what you're doing. Parenting can be that much harder. So we're all kind of in the same boat in that sense. I have teenagers myself, and they don't go easy on me. One of the things that I think is so interesting about young teenagers and young adults is they're kind of like they're different than us in certain ways, in certain very predictable ways, which can be hard for people to see when you're in the weeds with them. But they're, and I'll give you an example. I talked to a mom last week that she and her husband, they have a high school freshman, and she and her husband were supposed to pick her up after school and ended up getting there 20 minutes early. And so they thought, oh, well, we'll go in and see her school, because she'd never seen her school before. And I'm thinking, oh, this is not going to end well. Well, she goes, I'm hoping she's either on this webinar or listens to this, because she'll get a kick out of this. But anyway, she's telling a story, and she's kind of, I get there, and we're walking around the school. We're not there like 5 minutes, and we see her, and we're thinking she's going to be all excited. Well, she is horrified and can't get them off of that campus as fast enough, and she's just furious at them. She doesn't talk to them for 3 days. She sends them a scathing text in the middle of the night, that night, at 1 o'clock in the morning. And so this mom doesn't really get, it used to be that they want you to come to their school, and it's a big deal, and you feel bad that you're not visiting their school and not more involved. And then something changes all of a sudden, and the rules change, and they don't tell you about it. And it's interesting, because there's all this going on inside them that you see at moments like that you realize, I don't understand the rules. It's like going to a foreign country, and there's no warning. That reminds me of that game, that game Operation, where you got these tweezers and you're trying to get these organs out of this little kind of body, and you touch the side and there's this huge buzz. And that's kind of what happens, is you're sort of trying to do what you think you're supposed to be doing, and the noise that it makes is so jarring when you do it wrong. And that's kind of what happens with teenagers and young adults, is there's a lot of rules that you just don't get about their world. Their world is so different all of a sudden, and it's nothing like their world used to be, and it's nothing like our world. and that's one of the things about young adults is they're going through a really different life than the one that we're going through. And yet you're living in the same household and overlapping in it. In that sense, it can be a little unnerving for parents who end up kind of walking around on eggshells, feeling like, when's the next explosion going to happen? I don't even know what the rules are, and I'm breaking them, and then I'm getting shamed for it. So that's one of the things, is that there's a way in which they're going through things and handling things they're handling much more and dealing with a lot more inside of them than how it looks on the outside. So in a way, it's like if you have like a carrot, say you have a garden and you see a carrot, you see just the top and the green part. But if you pull it out, there's this whole, there's a carrot, this giant thing that's bigger than what you see. So you just see this little dainty little greens, and there's all this happening underground. And then inside the leaves that you see, it's fighting disease and insects and competing for sunlight. So it doesn't look like, when you look at the top of a carrot in the ground or a flower, like there's much happening. It looks very delicate and simple. But if you get into the science of it, there's a huge amount happening. And they look fragile because they go off on us for such small things. But if you look inside of them, like that particular client this is a step parent, is having a really difficult time in her other household. She's worried about a similar kid that I have is falling behind in school and is worried about it, but hasn't told the parents because they're afraid the parents are going to come down to the school and get involved. She doesn't know if there's something wrong with her. She's having a falling out with her two best friends. They're kind of turning on her. She likes a guy, but he doesn't like her. She's worried about, I don't know what I want to do in my life, and everybody else does. So all this stuff happening in their world that they're handling, so that when you mess with their world, they freak out. Because kind of like us, when we've had a whole bunch of things happen at the end of the day and then somebody does something, you just fall apart so easily. Well, that's why there's so much emotion, is because they're handling things and they're handling it. They're not involving you anymore. So they're handling everything else in-house. Everything you used to help them with, they're handling, and their problems get much more complicated in their teenage years with moods and their friends having moodiness, and their world just gets very complicated. So that's one of the things it's different about young adults. They're kind of like gremlins. I don't know if anybody saw that movie Gremlins, but they're like little creatures that have a completely different set of rules. And if you don't appreciate that, and you figure they have your same values, or you know them, it's going to be really hard for you to get involved and help them or influence them or try to shape them. They're just going to want to get away from you as fast as possible, because they can't really deal with you and your stupidity while they're trying to have their problems. So they end up kind of cutting you out of the loop. So that's one of the things that came out of my conversation with this mom. Is I said, let me talk to you about what's going on in her world. And she said, that's true. She doesn't invite us to anything. So in a way, you have to kind of pay attention to them in a little bit of a different way, and appreciate the fact that that's a different creature. You have to get to know them the way you have to treat them like you would a foreign country if you went and had to live there and blend in with their customs. So that's one of the challenges that I think parents don't respect in themselves, how much they're up against, is that they're dealing with something they don't really understand anymore, that, by the way, changes every 6 months and the rules change. So that's one of the things about young adults, is they're handling a lot more from the outside than what it looks like. And you don't really understand what their world looks like. The other thing that happens in them that's interesting is that the way that it's hard for parents is the way that young adults tend to metabolize themselves looks really scary from a parent standpoint. For example, they can get really fixated on a boyfriend or a girlfriend, and almost obsessive with a boyfriend or girlfriend that they might have just met 3 months ago. They're obsessed with their friends. They'd rather spend time with their friends than doing pretty much anything else. They'll tune out. They'll go play Fortnite for 5 straight hours and not sleep and not eat. So they get kind of very, very obsessive about things in a way that looks really unhealthy to parents. And if you look inside of them, what they're doing essentially is those are activities, typically what they get obsessed with are the activities where their head tends to clear. Essentially, that's how they get everything off their mind that they don't know how to handle. And it's evidence of the fact that there's something operating in them, helping them stabilize. Now, the fact that they get as obsessive shows you how much what measures they have to take to clear their head. So if they're with their friends all the time, it means that when they come home, their thoughts just when they're alone, their thoughts creep in on them, and their thoughts that creep in on them are much more intense than ours tend to be. So like I went to Africa a few years ago on a safari, and we saw this, the puff adder snakes. There's a snake called the puff adder. Well, we saw a little one on the side of the road, and so we stopped and we're watching it, from the car. And I said, so are these less lethal? Because he's so little, he doesn't look like he could hurt anybody, kind of cute. And he said, well, no, to the contrary, they're more lethal because they have no control over how much poison they put out. So they'll put all of it out there, and the adults kind of will conserve. That's kind of how teenagers and young adults are, is they don't do anything in a small amount. So if they're into their friends, they'll take a bullet for that friend. If they're into video games or a new app, they'll spend 9 hours on it. So they do everything in large amounts, and a lot of times what they're doing is what their obsessions show, first of all, how much they're handling, but also how committed their minds are to clearing and to finding some stability. And if the only place they can find their stability and clear their heads and relax is around their friends, they're going to spend every second they can with their friends. And as a parent, in a way, you want to respect that that's what they're doing. So there's a couple, so in a way, as you can imagine, a lot of parents really, in a way, underestimate teenagers and young adults. I'm guilty of the same thing with mine. Sometimes is that you see their obsessions and you feel like how are they going to adapt to society? Like Fortnite is you can't put that on your resume. Like, how is that helping them? Or why are they so reliant on their friends? How are they going to get through life if they're so reliant on their friends, or the fact that they fall apart because they visit their school? And it can look like your kids, young adults and teenagers can look fragile to us and like they can't metabolize anything. And we get concerned about how they spend their time. So in a way, parents end up misunderstanding their kids and not being able to understand some of these things about them. They end up feeling concerned about their kids because they don't really see the context behind what they're doing. They're not really looking for their strengths or the logic behind what they're doing. They don't really understand their kids. And as a result, they jump to concern, worry, and they end up essentially living in a kind of toxic feelings themselves, unnecessarily, one. And two, and when we get concerned as parents and we get freaked out, we end up getting essentially either controlling or uptight or tense, and in a way, we're in a leadership role as parents, so we end up being in really bad shape ourselves while watching our kids live their lives and getting disheartened. So that's one of the things that I do. It's one of the reasons that I'm able to help parents, even when their kids are not doing well, is because there's a huge amount parents can do by stepping back and understanding taking another look at what they're seeing in their kids that's freaking them out, and trying to see things in a little bit of a different light, learning to look for how there's strength in what they're doing, and get a respect for how much they're handling, and get a respect for their world. Parents feel much more reassured once they understand their kids a little bit better. And as a result, they end up bringing a lot more to the table in terms of being able to stabilize their kids through their own feeling more of a sense of faith, feeling more, it calms parents down when they realize, oh, okay, they're spending time with their friends because they're happy around their friends and they're miserable at home. That makes complete sense. And they can, when they look at it that way, when they consider that and they get their fear off their minds, it's really easy to see that that's what's happening. And it calms parents down. And if you have a kid that's handling a lot, the best thing you can do as a parent is to be able to be calm and present, so that once a year that they actually want your advice, you're there and you're not all intense and freaked out and wanting to read their journal. So that's they're being able to understand your teenagers and young adults is kind of being able to see the logic and the wisdom behind what they're doing, and seeing how resilient, how many things they're handling and that you don't even know about, is, in a way, it's a remedy for you that will bring you more peace of mind, and essentially take a huge amount of the worry and it will neutralize your need to be controlling and infiltrate their life and track everything that they're doing and freak out about every mistake they make or every failure. It essentially takes things off your mind and makes you live your life the way that you hope your kids will live their lives. You don't really want them doing what you're doing, which is, when there's a problem out there, you just freak out. And the problem with parents now in our culture, we kind of have a low normal. Parents are all kind of in agreement that our kids are not going to survive because they don't even know how to have conversations face to face anymore. And they're obsessed with electronics, and they don't have a work ethic, and they play Fortnite for 9 hours. So parents are a little kind of can fall asleep at the wheel about the feeling they're in the name of being concerned about their kids. They kind of stop looking at themselves because it looks like the bigger problem is in their kid. And that's really the biggest problem as parents. And it's the one problem with your kid you can actually influence. So that's kind of, that's what this conversation here is about, and really what all my conversations with parents are about, whether I work with their teenagers or not. Even if your kid's a drug addict, or they're homeless, or they're depressed or suicidal, your sphere of influence is still inside of you, and how much you step back and look to understand how your kid works and how you can best support them. Does this make sense so far? Rohini, any thoughts on any of this so far?
Yeah, I have some thoughts, but I'd like to just kind of open it up for people to ask their questions. So I'll share my thoughts. And while I'm sharing, just if you'd like to share, if you have a question for Erika, click the participants button and the raise hand button, and then I'll be able to call on you and I will unmute you. The reason I have everybody muted is just because of the background noise. So unfortunately, we can't all be unmuted. But, I was, as you were sharing, Erika, I was, really resonating with what you're saying in terms of, what we have is our ability to connect with our own well-being independent of what's going on with our kids. And I know, and Angus is here, so he can correct me if I'm wrong, but we both fell into this trap of believing that our concern was legitimate, and that feeling we were justified because of our concern, and getting all controlling and managing and getting in there. And it was, not only was that not working really for the relationship with our daughter, like we did it actually with both kids. You think we'd have learned better with the second one, but we're still learning. But what I realized is that we were, we were taking care of our anxiety through trying to manage them. But we weren't taking care of our anxiety at all, because the more we tried to manage them, the less control we had, the more we realized we had less control, the more anxious we got. So it became like this negative downward spiral for us as parents. And I remember one of the conversations we had with you where you talked about, one of the things we really, that was important to us is we want our girls to be confident. We want them to have a sense of their innate well-being and their inner confidence. And you pointed out to us, like, this is the best time for them to be learning and making mistakes. And you're not letting that happen. You're getting in the way. And yeah, these things are continuing to happen, but that's the learning curve. And we just had these really unrealistic expectations, like, oh, well, that's happened once. They're going to learn from that and not do that again. And then when it would happen again, we'd be like, oh my God, what's wrong here? And realizing, like, oh, learning happens in different ways. It happens in different times. Who are we to judge what that process looks like? Who are we to judge how long it takes? And what good are we as parents if we're showing up in our anxiety and not seeing, and not demonstrating our confidence in our kids? And that was something that really struck home, was that I wasn't demonstrating that confidence. How can I expect them to have confidence in themselves if I'm not mirroring that and modeling that and being like, yeah, you're going to be fine. Yeah, you're in a real mess right now, but I'm sure you can figure it out, or we're going to work together to figure it out. But you know what? I have confidence in you. You have everything you need inside of you. And it was shocking for me to see how difficult that was, how that wasn't natural to go there. With everything that I know about well-being and innate health, it's like it wasn't the first inclination that I had as soon as I got a little bit scared with my teenage daughters. So it was very humbling. And I think parenting is one of the best teachers and best spiritual paths out there, because it so requires us to look at our own relationship with our thoughts, to look at our own connection with our innate well-being, to really look in that direction and find that well-being inside, independent of whatever's going on outside. And I know, fortunately, we're not dealing with anything crazy or that difficult, but it's no different. Whether somebody's dealing with a life-threatening situation with their young person, it's like it's no different. What we have to offer is our ability to bring more peace and love to the equation rather than less.
And it's interesting too, if parents are honest and look inside themselves, they can't handle, if mistakes freak them out in their kids. Their kids going through making mistakes. They're like, well, I know what they can do. I'll just tell them. And they kind of take a position against, like, mistakes are bad and you should avoid them. And so the parents end up getting more controlling, or trying to be helpful and involving themselves. And it's so interesting because you're essentially teaching your kid to try to avoid mistakes, and that they, to not have faith that, just go live your life and half our decisions are going to be mistakes. Like, so you just got one out of the way. What's the big deal? It's a really different philosophy if you're telling your kid, oh no, mistakes, you should have anxiety if you could make a mistake. Let's figure out how to get around this mistake. That's essentially what parents end up doing for their kids.
Yeah.
And not wanting them to regret mistakes. And, a lot of that, I call it pre-gret, of, well, let's really think hard about this so that you don't regret later. Let's really still start regretting now, and feeling the horror of making the mistake. You get into that mentality, like, you got to pick the right path. Don't pick the wrong. So it is a funny thing that we're teaching our kid actively do. That's our strategy in parenting.
Yeah, I hear you. Yeah. We have a couple of hands raised. So the first person is Leah. Hi, Leah.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah, hi.
Hi. Thank you so much for doing this. I live in South Carolina, and I am sitting in the car as one of my 3 children are inside at a birthday party. So I have a 14-year-old, a 12-year-old, and a 5-year-old. And I'm very new into the principles, probably just about a year in, and I'm currently in Super Coach Academy right now. And so my question is, I have a client who's a mom, who is a single mom, and is going through a lot of stress around the same thing that we all do, where when you were saying about Fortnite, like, her son comes home, he's 10 years old, and that is the first thing he does, and he is obsessed about it. So in talking to her and trying to guide her, you know, into this principle understanding and innate well-being and everything, she's still very much like, so if I just understand this, then he's going to get off, you know, Xbox naturally. And I literally just kind of keep coming up to a wall, because I feel like, as though I'm talking to her, there's still something to understand more in the child himself.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you said that you talk a lot to parents, even if you don't speak to the children, are you still finding that it, you know, goes into where the child is struggling because you're just dealing with the parent, or do you try to encourage conversation with the child too, to guide them? Because
Yeah, that's a great question. That's a great question, because when I'm talking to parents, my job is to get them to see that the ideas that they have right now about parenting and about their kid are just the first batch that they just came up with. They just, you know, our fear response is oftentimes the first one that's there. And just because you spent 4 days playing video games as a kid and were kind of didn't care about anything else, that's not necessarily where they're coming from. And sometimes, so in a way, you want to be able to, my job is to get parents open so that and out from under their fear, so that they can show up to the situation with fresh eyes and say, okay, oh, he's 10. He doesn't really have the ability to regulate. Like, this kid needs some boundaries. And to be able to show up to a kid that's older and realize, oh, I guess I can't really put boundaries. If I put boundaries on this kid the way I want to, he's just going to become sneaky and start lying to me. So you want to be able to, you really have to take it case by case. So sometimes Fortnite is a great thing for your kid and obsessing about their friends. And sometimes you have to, you know, as a parent, it looks like, you know what, I feel like I should step in here. And you can't really make that decision and make that call if you're just living in fear and whatever scenario you've come up with in your mind. Parents just spend very little time really understanding their kids. And that's one of the points I was going to make in terms of the practicality of what we're talking about, is because there's so much about your kid's life that you no longer understand, and for your clients. And there's a little ecosystem in there that's working and helping them handle all of their stuff by themselves, that before you go in and try to rearrange the place or judge them or be ashamed about them or worry about them, you want to at least own the fact that you really don't understand this little person, that you have to get out of what everybody else is talking about video games, and stop and look at your kid and see, well, what do I know about this kid? Okay, this kid does need more boundaries. They need more structure than my other kids, and I haven't really done that here. Or, you know, it's realizing, you know what, it was easier having him play video games than parenting him. And so I've kind of gotten off track here as a parent, and I haven't really wanted to deal with the backlash, so I haven't done anything about it. This is kind of on me. And so there's a way in which parents have to first, you know, when things are out of hand and they're panicking about it or frightened about it, to be able to stop and step back and say, okay, let me look at the situation when my head is clear and I'm calm, and see and show up as if this is an ecosystem with a problem in it, and I'm trying to get an understanding of what's happening, is you have to at least cop to the fact that you maybe do not understand what's happening. And you have to step back and kind of watch and listen instead of running out and intervening. That's what I see in parents. In the same way you would at work, if you're a manager and there's chaos, is you can't just start blaming people and barking orders. You kind of have to take a minute, even though you're in a rush and there's a deadline, to stop and say, what am I dealing with here? Okay, this person I have to remove because they're freaking everybody else out. If I put them in a different office, everybody else can be working together. You just will see a really different strategy, and parents do not do that. It's their own kids. They get freaked out. They either disengage or they get in and overparent without really having their sensibility about them. Does that make sense?
It does, very much, very much.
And in that sense, they would have conversations with there's a lot of situations they would go in and have a conversation with their kid and intervene. But it would be a really different conversation.
I understand. That's very helpful.
Right.
And I think a lot of what I did also that I see, in addition to that, is that we have these, made up little versions in our head of what we think our kids should be. And then when they don't show up that way, it freaks us out.
Right. Absolutely. Especially if you think of them with a briefcase walking around as a 30-year-old. Like, they're not fit for life. Like, I can't, that's what we picture. Is they're just going to be, that's exactly how they're going to be as an adult. It really doesn't work that way. Fortunately, a lot happens in their teens and early 20s. Just their brain is not, it's not fully developed. So it does, it freaks us out. And then we come at them like, would you have to, we're trying to shape them and mold them. And we're really kind of have lost our shape ourselves at that point. So yeah, good question.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Leah. Thanks so much. So the next person who has their hand raised, there's no name. It just says Moto G3. I'll unmute you. Moto G3.
Put my name. I don't know how to put my name on there. My name is Sue.
Sue.
Can you hear me?
Hi, Sue.
Yeah, hi, Sue.
Yeah, I don't know how to fix that. That's the name.
I'll
that's my
fix
phone.
it on my end.
Okay. I guess my question is, like, I have basically a good kid. She doesn't drink. She doesn't do drugs. She doesn't have sex. She does her homework. Well, until now, she's been doing all her homework. Lately, she's letting one of her classes completely slip. So in some ways, I'm like, well, I have this kid who's good, and she has friends that she doesn't see much. She spends all her time on her phone in bed with her friends. And I know that she's very troubled. So now that I hear you saying that when they're with their friends, they're, kind of putting their troubles, dealing with their troubles that way. So I'm glad for that. But that's kind of like the only way she interacts with them is lays in bed on her phone and does the social media stuff. She doesn't want to talk to me about her troubles. I know my husband and I just separated 6 months ago. Her last older sister went to college, so she's kind of like, oh boy, I'm home with mom. Like she's dealing with a lot. Doesn't want to deal with me, and I guess being on her phone is how she deals with it. I guess where do you think you intervene? How do you just let it go then and let her deal with it that way?
Well, I think, and how old is your daughter?
She's 16. She tells me she's almost 18. She just turned 16. So I guess she feels like, wow, I'm ready to just sort of, fly the coop and leave.
Yeah, I got this. Right. I mean, it kind of, you kind of have to use, however many years of, however old you are, you get that many years of using social skills with people. And you kind of have to throw all of them in there when you have kids and when you have a situation where you feel like I should be doing something. I don't know what that is you just throw things at it. You just use your creative process to see, okay, well, let me try just to see if she wants help, because she might feel like, the best thing you can do. I have one of my kids tell me this, Mom, the best thing you can do is to leave me alone. That's, if you want to help me, that's what you would do. And I trusted him. It wasn't in the heat of a moment, but sometimes I was that way. Sometimes the best thing you can do is leave them alone. Now you can ask them. It's totally legal to ask your kid, do I need to be worried about you? Should I be helping you? Should I be doing something? I don't know what to do over here. You know, if you have any suggestions or requests, I feel kind of useless, but on the other hand, I'm invested in you, like half my genes and pretty much all of my emotional life is, you know, so you're important to me, to say the least. And I feel responsible, and yet like I don't know what I should be doing. And so, you know, can I do anything for you? And you seem to have, you know, most of your life seems to be, you seem to be doing fine, but there's certain areas I feel like you struggle. So you can ask her. And a lot of times they just, that's their way of working things out, is because they don't necessarily, there's so many problems come at them so fast, or so many things happen or going on in their mind. They don't really know what to do with any of them the way that we do. If I have a concern about something, I know, oh, I'm going to schedule a time to, you know, go see this person, or I'm going to Google this, or they don't always, you know, they don't have a lot of that. So, because they're new to having to handle things on their own, she may feel like, you know, just leave me alone and give me space and I'll handle this myself. She may not want it, but it's different when you reach out and say, you know, I worry about you just being on your phone and not, you know, having friends around as much. You know, do I need to worry about that? Here's what I worry about. I worry that you're going to get alienated, or that you can kind of you can be transparent about your concerns. If you're not all needy and intense, you know, if you can just talk to them like you'd talk to a friend of yours that seems like they've been down lately, is you just kind of reach out to them. And if you don't come at them and try to pry or assume that they want the help and try to figure out how, or come at them with your concern and intensity, you know, they're receptive and they appreciate your openness and they appreciate your transparency. And they also appreciate being able to say, thanks for asking. No, you don't have to worry about me. In fact, if you could just ignore that I'm here, that would be the best. Because I know when I come down for breakfast in the morning, you're like, should I talk to her? You know, they can feel that. They can feel you worrying about them. So a lot of times you just reaching out and saying, look, I'm here. I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing, but let me know if you have any requests. They know that you're in their corner, and then you can kind of see what she has to say.
Well, I feel like I've said that, and what I got was, well, if I tell you, you'll do something about it. And all I said was, well, if you're going to hurt yourself, I probably would. And she said, see?
Right.
That really pushed my anxiety up to a high level, but I didn't follow up on it because I thought, I'm trying to respect your space, but it's a little scary.
Right. Well, part of that is that they're not necessarily, I hear that a fair amount. A lot of times they just will have thoughts about hurting themselves, suicide, because that's kind of what's going around right now. That's what people do when they're really in despair, is there's just kind of it's a common idea that's floating around and people get freaked out by it. Not that it's not something that's happening, but a lot of times it's just when they're doing badly, that's the thought that comes to mind. The way that if somebody goes up in a violent, you know, I worked with a kid last year that was grew up in a street gang, and when you get frustrated, you get violent. You know, you go find somebody and beat them up. If you get angry, you come at a person. So it's just what tends to come around. That kind of thought comes around. It doesn't necessarily mean that they want to do it. It's just what tends to come to mind, and they can't. It's hard for them to know, especially if it's something that's serious. it gets a big reaction out of adults. And so then they can't really be honest and open about what they're going through. Now, sometimes what happens is if they feel like you've been too involved, like they told you something and then you involved yourself, like sometimes parents, if there's a problem with the teacher, they'll go down there and talk to the teacher, and then that's the last time the kid lets on that there's anything wrong. So sometimes there's other things going on. It's not necessarily that it's not necessarily she's wanting to hurt herself or kill herself. She has other problems, but doesn't trust that you're not going to do anything about it. You might have to say, look, if you can leave that part out, because that will freak me out, and I kind of have an obligation to, I'd feel an obligation to involve myself. If there's other things, I promise that I will stay uninvolved, that I will do my best to be able to listen. And if it feels like you're getting to where you're telling me something that I'm not going to be able to stop myself, then I'll stop you. Sometimes you have to work it out with them and say, look, in the past, I've gotten involved. I'm really sorry. I want you to be able to talk to me. And you can, if you've been an over-involved parent, sometimes parents have to kind of go back and say, look, I want you to be able to talk to me. And I know in the past, I haven't really honored you confiding in me. And I want you to know that I'm able to do that. But if it's something like them hurting themselves, it's a tough call it's a lot to ask of a parent to be able to have them tell you that and have you just be able to listen the way that I would be able to. So it's
all right, thank you.
Sometimes you're not always the person that can help them. And so you do your best, but it's not, you're not, she's gonna have to figure things out herself for the rest of her life. She's just starting a little earlier. So it's kind of, in a way, it's not on you. If there's nothing you can see to do, or there's no opportunity to do it, then your job is to just step back and love her and support her and believe in her and do your best to, to try to have faith and confidence in her versus trying to protect her, because you just don't have the opportunity.
Okay, thank you.
That makes sense. Thank you for the question.
Thank you, Sue. Thanks so much. Okay, we're going to go to Jen Moore. Hi, Jen.
Hi. Yep, I'm off. I really don't know where to begin with my situation that I have with my daughter. She's nearly 20. She's 25 at the end of this month. 2 years ago, she went down the ice path. So she's still really extremely lost in every area. Her and I have a very fractured relationship because it's either the way she wants life or that's it. There's no other way. And for many years, she has no control over her. Like she'll be nice one minute, then she's just flipped the next. August 17, she was she ended up going into a hospital because she did ice again, had suicidal ideation. Instead of, doing something silly, she called the police, which meant that then she went into a hospital that looks after this kind of situation. And they diagnosed her with borderline personality. Now, I know that that's just a name. And I know that, she can get an insight and, life will be good for her. But she's still not doing anything to help herself. She's just absolutely lost. We organised for her because she couldn't come back here because all she does is she gets angry and then takes it out on me and says some really horrific, bad things. And then it got to the point where it was a case of, well, who's going to look after me if she comes home here? So my ex-husband said he would take her, and my cousin would take her until he could take her. So there was a 3-week with my cousin and then my ex-husband would take. This was, we all agreed on that this was the best thing for her. The doctor spoke to my ex-husband, and I went and picked her up from the hospital. She didn't want to do any of this. This is wasn't what she wanted. So, but at the time she agreed to it. Drove her home. Within an hour, she said, "You can't tell me what to do. You're not my next of kin. I've changed it to my dad," and walked out. Because she'd been released money from what we call our Centrelink, which is, you know, if you're unemployed or whatever, that we get money from, they get the money from them. Then I ended up going to, I had to go to Townsville on the Saturday. So she was going to a part of Queensland and I was going to a few other hours above where I was, but we were both leaving on the same day within half an hour of each other. So I still left the following day. And then on the Tuesday, she rings me up, "Oh, I don't have anywhere to stay now. Can I come home?" And I said, "No, you can't." And it just popped out that I said, "No, you're not welcome anymore." Probably that wasn't the best word I could have used, but I did use it, and it is what it is. So she ended up going to my parents for 3 months, and the same behaviour, you know, started again. Sleeping all day, staying out all night, and they're in their 80s.
Well, and that's the thing is, with this is it's a great example of a situation in which, as parents, kind of on what I talked about with the last question, is that as a parent, because they're masters of their own domain, you know, at some point they kind of stop involving you and being interested in your values and how you do things, and you can't really influence them. Even if they're living in your house, they're gonna do things exactly the way that they want. And in a way, it gives you permission to step back and say, all right, well, really, it used to be as parents that you're loving them and guiding them. And when they're smaller, there's a lot more of the guidance part and instructions and influencing them. As they get older, there's less and less and less of that, until there's very little of it, unless they ask you. You're not really trying to guide them and influence them. Your job is to just love them. And sometimes what love looks like is, I have to step back so that when you're out there swinging, kind of like if they had epilepsy and they're having fits, you don't want to stand right next to them. You want to appreciate, oh, they kind of lash out. And I want to make sure that they don't I have to protect our relationship from them because they're not doing it. And that's one of the ways as you do it, is you have to, as a parent, be able to see, I would love to do something to help them or guide them, and I can't. And the only thing I can do is make sure that I don't get brought down with them. And sometimes that looks like kicking them out. That's what tough love is. The more you can get out from, the sadness of, or the grief of, like, they're not going to have the life that I want for them, and they're not the kid that I used to know. I don't even know I don't even recognize them anymore. If you can get out from under that, to whatever degree you can get out from under the sadness of trying to protect them from life, and consider, well, maybe your job as a parent is to just, as best you can, love, appreciate them, try to have faith in them. Or sometimes it's not faith in them, it's faith in life and in people. That people seem to be able to find their way out of things like this, even though you have no proof of it in your kid. For every drug addict, there's a drug addict that's turned it around. And I'm pretty sure they did it not because their parents were there talking to them and had the right conversation. So your situation is great, because if you take even the most extreme situation where their life's in danger and there's nothing you can do to help them tactically whatsoever. In fact, you have to refuse any involvement. Your job is still the same, to be able to kind of step back and see, my job is to keep my bearings as best I can as a person, so that I can see if there's an opportunity to help, and so that I can appreciate the qualities that they have and figure life seems to right itself. And people seem to be able to find their way through things, and that same force is operating in everybody. So my daughter has that. So there's a safety net that they have that takes you as parents off the hook, even in the most extreme situation, and especially in the most extreme situation. So you want to be able to find some, even if you can't find a reason to have faith and confidence in your own kid, because there's no evidence of it that you can see, you want to be able to find some faith and confidence in humanity and in life and people's ability to find their own resilience at some point, and it's going to be on their own schedule. That's what people bring to the table. That's what when you have kids, it's not just the kid, but there's something operating behind them. We call it mind, you can call it God, or whatever you want to call that. There's an intelligence that's operating in them that's doing most of the parenting. You're kind of like the garnish. You're like this, some seasoning. You're definitely not the bulk of what's happening in them. There's a lot of kids out there that have grown up in horrible environments and are doing fantastic. So Dan, there's a lot of parents that did everything right, and their kids are just a disaster because there's something else operating there. And yet human beings have a propensity to kind of adapt and survive. It just doesn't happen. Sometimes it just takes an incredible amount of patience, and it just requires you to go back to the drawing board much more than all the other parents of, all right, I have to find my faith and my confidence again because I've lost it, and to have some sense of that. So I'm glad you asked that, because I think for the parents out there that are, worried about, well, the worst case scenario, what if they end up on drugs and, maybe homeless, or I don't know what's happening to them. Your instructions are still the same as a parent. So it kind of, the rules of engagement are the same. That you have to look out for your own well-being and clear your head, even if it means getting some distance from them to do that. You're doing that in the name of that's your contribution to their plight, even though it might sound selfish to them. Sometimes it might sound selfish to you. Otherwise, you're no good to them. So I'm glad you asked that, and I think all the other parents listening, the message and the direction that you're looking at as a parent is the same, no matter what the particulars. Rohini, I just wanted to ask, is this go an hour?
Yeah, the plan was an hour.
Okay, I forgot to ask you in the beginning. I want to make sure that we
yeah, thank you, Jen. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah, thanks for your questions. You guys, thanks for all your, your honesty and the particulars in these questions.
Yeah.
Great.
So if there's anybody else, we do have some time right before we finish up. If there's one last question, I don't see any hand raised, but just to give you the opportunity. And Sue, back to Sue. Hang on one second. Hi, Sue.
Hi, I didn't want to hog the question, so I was waiting to see if anybody else wanted to ask. So I guess what I'm wondering is, my view was when my kids turn 18, I'd be all hands off and just offer to be there if they need anything. So when my kid's 16, or if you had a 14-year-old who was a little more precocious, do you set any limits? Do you say, well, your curfew's 11, we can negotiate it on special events? I guess I'm trying to figure out where's the boundary. I know it's different for everybody, but do you say, well, I've given you all my guidance, now you'll have to put it to use or not? So I guess a little.
No, that's a great question. And it's a point that I think can be very liberating for a lot of parents. There's absolutely no rules with how you parent. So what we're pointing you to is getting yourself to where your mind is as clear and kind of creative and logical, that you have as much common sense as a parent as you possibly can. So it happens that the quieter and the more calm you are inside yourself and your well-being, the more sensibility you have as a parent. It's the same if you're a business leader. It's the same if you're, if you're doing something difficult like a brain surgery. You want your head as clear as possible, especially if the stakes are high. What that means is that the reason that matters so much is because you really have to show up in kind of a brainstorming mentality about parenting, because you don't really know, like each kid is different. And so some kids need a lot of structure and strict parenting. I was very strict with one of my kids, and the exact opposite of strict with the other kid. And then a year or two goes by and it changes. It used to be that I didn't have to do anything with that kid, and then all of a sudden I had to get more strict on certain things. So even the things that work with one kid and don't work with the other, it changes year to year. So there's no rules as far as what you do as a parent. So you might have, if you feel like intervening as far as electronics or curfew, whether they do their homework, you have to kind of try things and see what makes sense. And sometimes your ability to, your intervening might be what they need, but it's completely backfiring. And you have to say, all right, well, I don't know how to intervene anymore. And then you just have to let it play out. And they have to figure it out themselves, because you don't know how to install any parenting. You've thrown everything from every book at them and talked to all the other parents and nothing's worked. And so then you're just left with a kid that just eats junk food and absolutely no nutrition around the clock. I was like that for 2 years. I had a horrible diet. My parents, there's nothing they could do about it. In fact, the more they tried to do about it, the more, kind of mischievous and, I was spite eating. You kind of get to where you're like, so you're kind of, you just bring out the less mature side of them, and they know you have no cards in your hand. So it's just up to you and your creative process to see what makes sense for this particular kid and what do I think I can do. So it doesn't, you have to kind of, your instincts will tell you how to make that call.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Thank you, Sue.
It's, it's funny. It's, it doesn't look like this, but I hear this, I don't know if you've heard that joke before about chameleons. They say about chameleons, a guy walks into a chameleon store and says, do you have any chameleons in stock? And the shopkeeper says, I have no idea, because it looks like a bunch of empty cages. Well, the thing is about chameleons is it's not like some of them figure out how to change their color. Like, that amazing capability is in all of them. So all the chameleons, if there was a chameleon store, all of them are kind of born with this amazing ability. In fact, they figured out that blind chameleons change color from birth, that are born blind from birth, change color. So there's something happening in them that there's really very, very little pressure on parents. I know it looks like, it's like a dog on a leash and you're responsible for everything that happens to them. It doesn't really work like that. There's something so much bigger that was parenting us than our parents. And there's something so much bigger and more intelligent, fortunately, raising your kids. It just does not look like that. So it's not like that you don't have any influence, but the influence you have, there's, the pressure's off. So that's one of the things. We're doing a workshop down in Topanga, actually, May 4th and 5th in Los Angeles, California, so Topanga. is an area of Los Angeles. I'm doing a workshop for specifically for teens and young adults. It's going to be a relatively small group so that it can be interactive. I'll have them for 2 full days. And it's the title of it is The Confidence Factor, your ultimate answer to the uncertainties in your life, your relationships, and your future. One of the things that is going to be central in that workshop is the idea that they have exactly what they have built into them is the same thing chameleons are drawing on to change color, that they're born with a certain set of assets, that you want to be able to learn about that and look to that. That's where your instincts live. It's where your common sense lives. When you're in a situation, everyone's drinking, and there's that part of you that's like, well, maybe I won't get in that car. That there's a part of us that that is alive and is guiding us, and we have that. We don't have to rely on our parents. We don't have to rely on our upbringing or our personality. So in the same way that I'm talking to you guys about this, there's a way in which kids can appreciate and understand that, teenagers and young adults. So anyway, I'm doing this workshop in California, but all of my work, I'm telling, teenagers and young adults exactly the same thing. So it's not like when I get on the phone with them or I'm coaching them or they come here, that I'm giving them instructions. I'm essentially drawing them out and showing them where their sensibility lives about their problems, so they end up finding their way to that. So your kids, even when they come to people like me, that's the only thing I'm interested in, drawing that out, because I can see that's their biggest asset. They don't need somebody living their life. And so they have so much more going for them, and it helps take the pressure off them and to take the pressure off you. When you can appreciate that, you can kind of take a deep breath and relax, and you'll enjoy your kid a lot more. And that, frankly, is the best thing you can do for them over giving them good advice and good guidance.
Yeah, that's so fabulous. And I love what you said earlier about kids being parented by mind, like, and we're the garnish. Like it really, to me, is a wonderful metaphor for that deeper knowing that they have inside of them is so much greater than what we can add on as parents. And we're still going to do it, but they have that. And in the same case, we have that too as parents. We are mentored in that way from our inner knowing, from that deeper intelligence that's inside of us. And so when we're all looking more in that direction, it's amazing. Even just a little bit more in that direction, it's amazing the differences that can happen in relationships and families. So
yeah, and your teenagers will notice that.
Yeah, exactly. And so thanks for letting us know about the workshop. And is that on your website if people want to find out information? Yeah,
so my website's erikabugbee.com. And you'll see an announcement about that. You'll also see there's a download if you want to see what other announcements I make or content I put out. You can sign up for my list. There's a download that you'll get if you sign up. It talks about the fundamentals of the parenting fundamentals for teenagers, for parents of teenagers. One of the things it talks about is being able to look for the strengths in your kid. That's the only thing I'd leave you guys with is whether you read that or not. There's something in being able to look for the strengths in your kids and what they have going for them that I think as a parent has done the best thing for me. I think that's what happened for you, Rohini and Angus, is that I needed to hear that too as a parent. And it's just, I've been able to enjoy my kid a lot more. So I hope you take nothing else from this, you take a little bit more appreciation and you relax a little bit as a parent, so that you can really take them in and enjoy them while they're still interested in hanging out with you.
Absolutely. And I know for us, when we did that, it was like magic in terms of the change of behavior. All of the escalation that was happening just stopped. And I'm not saying that that's going to happen for everybody. I'm not saying that A leads to B. But I could see how my state of mind or our state of mind as parents was fueling the escalation in their behavior from their wisdom to try and stabilize, to try and find their way. So, it is such a beautiful shift that the feedback, you get the feedback to let you know, is it working or not working? But no matter what, we can always look to that place inside of ourselves, which is so powerful and so freeing and liberating as parents, because we get to enjoy our lives.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Good.
Well, thank you, Erika. Thank you so much. And some people are asking if this is recorded. It is recorded. It will be available in the Soul Centered Series Facebook group. It will also be available on my website probably by tomorrow. I'm guessing it will be up there as well, rohiniross.com. So if you want to listen again or you'd like to share with someone else, you can do that. And I'm going to unmute everybody so that we can all say goodbye.